African Universities, a plea for creative approaches and critical pedagogies.
We, the researchers studying the creative lives of African universities, pedagogies of hope and despair, hereby issue this declaration of our respective positions. This is a manifesto of our hopes, an acknowledgement of our influences and predispositions, a call out to the audiences we hope to reach.
On the inspiration of Pedagogies of Hope and Despair,
we are conscious of the fact that too often people have been made to believe that any education is better than no education at all. We reject that way of thinking.
There are objects and methods of education which, rather than opening minds and lives to knowledge, force them into not knowing the world and denying the self. Certain methods and didactic approaches generate alienated intellects that are the fruit of systemized cultural violence.
We maintain, along with Paulo Freire, that there are forms of education that breed hope, and those which keep many oppressed and in despair. We align to this belief that education can both make and break, create and destroy, build up and knock down. And thus we proceed from the stance that one must question what is being taught and learned, and the origins of the teaching and learning in the institutions we belong to and that shape us.
We commit to examining the phenomena that fuel pedagogies of despair, the authoritarian instructor, student subalternity complex, the precarious nature of learning environments, as well as those features that generate hope, inclusive, creative, and participatory approaches, contextually relevant conceptual framings, and a curriculum that satisfies learners' practical and strategic aspirations for their education, as well as institutional needs. We must question fully the tools used in our respective institutions in order to bring about an epistemic change. To this end, we adopt the words of the Congolese thinker and writer Valentine Mudimbe, according to which the university will only be truly African if it contributes as best as it can to knowing and solving the contradictions of African societies and takes on the role that falls to it in the creation of new social forms.
On our influences,
we acknowledge that aside from Freire and Mudimbe, many other scholars, artists, practitioners, activists, and more have carried out similar explorations, highlighting the double-edged sword formal higher education can become if not handled critically. It is on the shoulders of the works of the following people and many others that we seek the furthering of knowledge in this area. We add to their voices with this manifesto, noting our appreciation for the available empirical scholarship. We underscore the lacunae concerning the understanding and imaginary of Francophone African university context. There are still many paths to tread and to cross.
On the co-conspirators, their hopes and despairs. In conversations since 2019 and having convened in person in Dakar, Yaoundé, Abomey Calavi, as staff linked to 4 African universities, les Universités de Yaoundé 1, Cameroon, Université Abomey Calavi, Benin, Université Félix Houphouët-Boigny, Côte d'Ivoire, and Université Cheikh Anta Diop, Senegal, we have collectively answered the question of what drives us to interrogate the university. We despair at the flagrant or insidious intrusion of political authorities in governance of our institutions, the tacit aim to assert political control and extract benefits. We despair at the massification of our universities that result in the rapid deterioration of infrastructure and the burnout of academic and non-academic staff unable to bear the strain. We despair at the brain drain from colleagues because, among several complex factors, remuneration is unable to support most families, and because the state does not appreciate its intellectuals enough to strive to keep them. We despair also at the causes that drive students to leave the country en masse because their training is not able to adapt to national and global systems. We denounce the prejudices and lies inherited from colonial systems, reproduced and cemented in classrooms decades after the departure of the imperialists. We acknowledge the conditions that have prevented the full participation of women and disabled people in our universities. We have railed against the assorted epistemic and linguistic injustices that hinder the free flow of knowledge within and between African universities, and the ever-shrinking breadth of academic freedoms that lack of research funding of our own, by our own.
We deplore the persistence of epistemic injustice which prevents the knowledge of marginalized individuals and groups from being taken into account when searching for solutions to their problems. We revere the invisibilization of African researchers, whose research is often relegated as mere fodder for that of their Western colleagues. We recognize that these problems are largely the result of the colonial situation. They are not isolated phenomena. We know that they stem from structural dysfunctioning of current governance, as much from micro and meso perspectives within African states and across the continent, as macro at the international scale in terms of deterioration of exchange rates, latent neo-imperialism disguised as economic liberalism, monetary domination under the pretext of aid and development cooperation.
It is in response to these situations that we, researchers connected in the AfriUni project, adopt creative, participatory, and transformative paradigms anchored in Africa to explore, understand, and analyze the lived experiences of African universities in Benin, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, and Senegal. This involves a rebalancing of scientific and so-called experiential knowledges, which restores often marginalized sites of knowledge production.
The challenges faced compel us to research in ways that reflect the change we desire and the hopes we nourish. Hopes for more academic mobility. Hopes for better equipped institutions. Hopes for increased investment in and fostering of creativity.
Hopes for campuses that represent us with infrastructure, buildings, cleanup projects, named in honor of our indigenous notables and knowledge systems rather than foreign funding bodies and imperialist.
Hopes for systematic self-referencing, which does not mean closure to the other, but a desire to depend firstly and above all on oneself. Hopes for better management of massification such that our diversities become something to be celebrated rather than a fuel for institutional violence. Hopes for more active commitment to intellectual labor and its ethical dimensions in society. On these grounds, this research project models community engagements with students and teachers, external stakeholders, members of third spaces and external geosocial communities around the campuses.
The research envisages multilingualism, with the process and outputs made available in Kamfranglais, Wolof, Diola, English, Lingala, French, Nuchi, Fongbe, Hausa, Arabic, Fulfulde, and French. It models the decolonization of research practice via not only theoretical collaboration, but methodological and financial decentralization of resources.
It equally models Africa-anchored orientation in knowledge sharing via commitment to open access and the availability of research findings to those for whom this research matters most. Above all, it models the articulation of research in ways that are accessible to the general public and not merely the ivory tower. It illustrates the means of converting objects of study into active subjects of the research, who co-produce knowledge based on their own social and creative experiences in order to encourage multilateral knowledge production. We aim to explore cultural representation and lived experiences of university life on the African continent from 1960 to the present day, with the aim of deepening understanding of how these contested institutions have been perceived and have played a role in sociocultural and epistemological reproduction in the context of multilingual and plural histories.
Creative and fully human lives are at the heart of this work. With this declaration, we invite you to join us on this journey, to hold us to our word, to hearken our pleas, and to share them while urging this conversation onwards.